When Ken Burns was putting the finishing touches on his 15-hour PBS documentary, The War, we were out gathering our own stories closer to home, your stories of World War II. Anne-Marie Berger tonight has the story of a very famous battle, not as told by the writers and the historians and the professors, but as told by the men, the boys really, who fought that battle and lived to tell about it.
By February 1945, the war in Europe was winding down. It wasn't over and it was still dangerous, but Hitler had withdrawn forces from the Ardennes region, ending German offensive operations. However, the fighting in the Pacific was just heating up, and American forces there were on the verge of executing Operation Detachment. They were invading the Japanese island of Iwo Jima. On February 19th, U.S. bombers and Navy ships began to fire upon Iwo Jima, and Marine forces landed on its beach, marking the first American attack on Japanese homelands. The objective was to capture the airfields, and more than 110,000 American men fought in this 34-day battle, all of them with a story to tell.
I ended up being an artillery forward observer with the infantry.
I was scared, but I wasn't afraid. There's a difference there, and because we were trained and we knew what we were going to do.
Charles Kohler and George Green had seen a lot of combat by the time they arrived on Iwo Jima. They were both Marines in separate divisions. They knew what they were up against, and they were ready for it.
We knew somebody was going to get hurt. But you never thought it was going to be you. You know, you always felt like your buddy next door, and you hope not. But, you know, that's the way we went in there.
They allowed 2 divisions, but they always had a reserve division. So the 4th and 5th would be making the initial landing. The 3rd would be in what they call floating reserve. In other words, you'd be right there. And several regiments of the 3rd would be closer to shore than other regiments. And we observed the landing on the first day. And it wasn't going so good because the beaches were being blasted.
This Admiral the Jap, I forget his name now, he wasn't going to fight that battle like the rest of those islands were fought. Start trying to kill us as soon as we come. He let 4 or 5 waves of men come in. We all go in one wave, then wave 2, Blue Beach 1, White Beach, and so forth. He let us get in there until we had thousands of guys on the beach trying to get out of that sand, getting up and trying to get up to the first place we wanted to get to, the airport. And that's when they started letting out, after they had us all in there, they had this beach. I would say it's a big checkerboard. Red spot, red spot, black spot. And they had mortars lined up to hit every one of those spots. Artillery's coming down, but those doggone mortars, they just kept walking them down on us. And I thought, oh boy, we're going to get killed. Now I thought this is the time I thought maybe we might get killed here.
So we were in the landing boats very early in the next morning on D+1, which was February the 20th, which was my 23rd birthday. So we got in those landing crafts and we circled. Each landing craft circled behind the other one all day because we could not get into the beach. The beaches were so crowded, or so fouled up.
We all jumped into a hole because Suribachi was just behind us, and they were firing machine gun bullets at us, inflated fire right down the beach, you know, so we had to get down into the hole. And I got out of the hole to go over to the lieutenant, and I said, "Lieutenant, you got to move us out." I said, "We got to get out of this area here, because they got us wired in, because it's coming down and it's hitting everybody." He says, "We can't, Carly, we can't leave until I get orders from the captain." I said, "Well, if we stay here, we're going to get it." And it wasn't 10 minutes later when we got it, and that shell that came right down in our hole, boom, came down, killed everybody but me. I got wounded through the both legs. I had the plantar nerve ripped through my foot, and went in and went out and just tore the plantar nerve. Crawling down to the beach, there was no help. They gave me a shot of morphine. There was no help because there was so many people there in big trouble. I'm crawling down the beach because I couldn't walk on that thing, and I didn't want to get any that black sand in there. Doing the best I could when I get hit again. Now, this time they hit me in the left buttock.
Charles Kohler was evacuated and taken to a field hospital in Hawaii, where the shrapnel from his second injury was removed. He was injured on the first day of battle, and unfortunately, he wasn't the only casualty in his family that day.
My brother Eddie, he's 2 years younger than I was, but we joined together. We wanted to fight, which all Marines really wanted to do. I said, "What have they got you doing?" He says, "I'm a flamethrower." I said, "Ed, you got a sore back. You can't hardly straighten up. I tell you, get a sore back and tell them you can't carry that thing, because that is the worst job in the Marine Corps. It really is." I said, "Don't let them do it." He says, "Well, they're training me for it." And he says, "I don't know what I'm going to do." He says, I said, "Well, you got chances of getting killed a lot more now if you're going to carry that flamethrower." Bingo, first day. He got killed and I got wounded, you know. But so did a lot of other fellows there. That was the worst Marine Corps battle in their history.
As U.S. casualties multiplied, so did the number of Marines on Iwo Jima.
That night, we went back aboard ship. The next morning, they put us in the landing craft again, and bright and early in the morning, we were able to get ashore. So we spent the first day ashore in a shell crater, and still the beach was under artillery and mortar fire.
The raising of the United States flag took place on the fourth day of battle, and while it was a sight to see, encouragement and motivation for the soldiers, it would be followed by 30 more days of intense fighting.
The artillery would start and everything, and we would get up and follow the artillery. We just run as fast as we can and stop when we got tired.
But resting on the island of Iwo Jima, especially in the middle of a battle, was near impossible.
You couldn't dig down because Iwo Jima is Sulphur Island. You couldn't dig down more than 6 inches or so. So, because it would be too hot. And you couldn't sleep on one side or the other because it would be too hot. So you had a bad night. But what was good, you buried your sea ration cans, and by the time you got to eat them, they were hot. So that was a good thing about that.
George Green had his fair share of close calls, a near-miss bullet to the head, grenades exploding in front of him, living under the constant barrage of mortars. Being captured was a dishonor for the Japanese, and they fought to their death.
The only thing that we knew, based on experience, is they were there to kill us. And our attitude is, we got to kill them first. I would say that they were very well disciplined, like the guy in that threw those 2 grenades at me. He was in what was called a spider hole, and that's where he was put to die. But before he died, he was to kill 10 Marines.
When the fighting began, the Japanese had 21,000 soldiers on the island of Iwo Jima. More than 20,000 of them were killed. The island was declared secure on March 26, 1945, and by battle's end, more than 27,000 American soldiers were either dead, wounded, or missing. Despite the casualties, losing the battle, losing the war, never crossed their minds.
No, I didn't worry about that, nor did any one of our guys. Any Marine there was there to do what he was trained to do.
Because you had a job to do, and you were trained to do that job, and that's what you did.